Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we will be talking about Poor Things, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, starring Emma Stone, Mark Ruffalo, Willem Dafoe, Rami Youssef, Christopher Abbott, and Gerard Carmichael. And obviously, if you remember all the way from the beginning of the year, this is the last film from my top 10 most anticipated films of the year that came out in 2023 that I had to see. And naturally, I was very excited because this was the film I was the most looking forward to for the rest of the entirety of the last week we have of this year. And I've been pretty big on Yorgos Lanthimos' past works, maybe not quite to the level of some other people, but when I first saw The Lobster back in 2016, I'm like, what the hell is this? And I was hooked right from then. It was one of my favorite movies of the year. Looking back, it wouldn't have made my top 10 if I'm being honest. An amazing, amazing first half. Second half kind of gets a little bit boring, I think. Favorite, I really liked, didn't quite love like a lot of other people did, but I've thoroughly enjoyed and respected almost all of Yorgos' projects that I've seen after The Lobster, and some even before, like Dogtooth, which is one of the craziest things ever. And I was also really excited because this is his re-teaming with Emma Stone since his last project with her being The Favorite, which she was nominated for an Academy Award. And just the story is so out there and bizarre because it obviously follows a scientist by the name of Godwin Baxter who reanimates this dead woman to life who is implanted with the brain of a child. And it's a very Frankenstein-esque story, but also a very, very interesting, bizarre, provocative coming-of-age film that is bound to be a classic, if I'm going to be quite honest with you, because my anticipation was quite warranted. This is one of the best movies of the year. Straight up, I absolutely adored this film. I think that this is also Yorgos Lanthimos' best work as a filmmaker, hands down. And I genuinely think that this is like maybe the best directed film of the year after The Zone of Interest. Would be more than deserving for Yorgos Lanthimos to win Best Director at the upcoming Oscars. And I would go even further to say that there is a slight chance that he will. Now, Nolan has got it pretty locked down for Oppenheimer, as we have, kind of come to that conclusion by this point in time. But if there was going to be an upset, I think Yorgos would be the one to place your bets on. Because the thing that's so amazing about Yorgos Lanthimos, especially in this film, the world that he creates is such a bizarre vision that has so much going on character-wise, visually. It is literally the definition of an auteur film from the very first second and frame of this movie, which completely sucked me in like that. And I absolutely love the work from a directorial standpoint. Also, Robbie Ryan's cinematography, who comes back from The Favorite. And I think, usually fisheye lens really annoy me, but I think in this case, it was some of the most innovative usage I've ever seen of the fisheye lens, and it sometimes looks like they're looking through a peephole, through a door, and you're kind of like a passive observer of what's going on, or more so a voyeur into this very strange and off-kilter world that is brought to life so beautifully by the Art Deco design, which honestly, as much as I love the production design in Barbie, this could win, and I would not be upset if either one did, because, my goodness, I've never seen sets quite like this. They're so creative, detail-oriented, and really help create this wonderful and wacky vision of this very steampunk-esque world where all of this is taking place, and honestly, it heightens the film that much more. In addition to the visual effects, which aren't the most apparent, but I think some of the most bizarre and also subtle, because you see it in a few moments and you're like, it's obviously a visual effect, but it looks so damn good. You don't even question it for a second, and I totally think it's deserving of that as well. And on that note, when we're talking about all the technical stuff, which is just incredible, the writing in this film, the script from Tony McNamara, is one of the absolute best of the year. And I think the dialogue is so specific and has such a cadence to it that only a certain cast of actors could truly bring to life. And I think this cast absolutely does that from top to bottom. Willem Dafoe, a lot of people are talking about him maybe getting an Oscar nomination. I can certainly see it. It's definitely a performance that leaves quite an impression on the narrative, and what he does with that character is, yet again, truly impressive from a technical standpoint. Yet again, the makeup that they use for the creation of Godwin Baxter and Dafoe's transformation into this mad scientist character is truly one to be commended. I think we'll definitely get a makeup nomination at the upcoming Academy Awards. Rami Youssef, I haven't seen the show that he's on, that he's gotten great reviews for, but I genuinely think he's a really great addition to the cast here. And his feature film debut, surprisingly, but, you know, he translates very well over to the big screen. And he plays a very, very integral and heartwarming role in this film, I think. A very, very wholesome performance overall. And, you know, there's a lot of supporting players that show up throughout the entirety of this movie. But my goodness, Mark Ruffalo in this gives one of the best comedic performances I have seen in such a long time. I mean, Ryan Gosling has nothing on this. I'm sorry. And the thing that's so amazing is Mark Ruffalo has kind of been, as he said, I'm pretty sure, depressed dad mode for the past 10 years or so, has been typecast in very similar roles. And here you see this guy who, by all accounts, is an incredibly humble, incredibly generous, and very soulful person become an absolute bastard of a human being, and really is just absolutely off the chain in this. And his delivery, his reactions to all the situations in which he's put in this film is absolutely hysterical. And he's very critical to Bella Baxter's understanding of this world, played by the magnificent Emma Stone in what I think is easily the best performance of the year. And I think easily the best performance of her entire career, period. My goodness, what Emma Stone has to do for portraying the character of Bella Baxter is so technically impressive. It's unbelievable, because she essentially is playing this child who is trapped inside a woman's body, and throughout the entirety of the film has to fully mature into a woman and make it believable. And my goodness, she does. Just the wide-eyed optimism. I mean, she already has wide enough eyes. It really helps accentuate this sense of discovery that Bella is feeling throughout this entire runtime, and just seeing the world through a fresh pair of eyes. This optimism that's just so glaringly apparent and so beautiful to kind of take in and watch the story unfold from her perspective. It's really, really quite spectacular. I mean, from an emotional standpoint, from just the fact that this is one of the most fearless performances I've ever seen. I mean, she lays it all out there, literally. And I think we're all the much better because of it, because this is just such a committed role, one that will easily win her second Oscar. I mean, there's been so many great performances in lead actress category this year, which I think might end up being the best year for lead actress in the history of the Academy Awards. I don't even think that's a stretch to say, because everybody is firing off on all cylinders. But Emma Stone is the one that I think truly transforms just, you know, physically, emotionally, mentally, but also throughout the course of the film, following Bella Baxter's journey to womanhood and autonomy is something that is really, really quite beautiful and quite unbelievable to watch unfold before your eyes. And on that note, I mean, I already mentioned Barbie a couple times. I genuinely think that this is a weirder and more thoughtful version of Barbie, because hear me out, I mean, this movie is essentially saying the same thing, but in a much more deep, very understated type of way. I mean, of course, this film is so wacky in regards to its sense of humor, its portrayal of sex, which is some of the most sex I've ever seen in any movie, to be honest. But at the same time, it approaches these ideas in a way that makes you think. It doesn't tell you what to feel. It just lets these scenes and these characters breathe. And that's what I absolutely love about McNamara's script and Yorgos' direction here. Because there's a few moments with some of these character interactions that really, I had conversations with people after saying, what did you think about that scene? And I think that's really beautiful, because with Barbie, they just tell you this is what it is. And you get none of that here. Like, maybe a little bit by the end, you obviously understand the meaning of the story and what the thesis of the film is about. But there's certain moments, especially the nuance in how they portray men in this film, because in a lot of other movies, like, oh, men are horrible, men are horrible, men are horrible, and I get it. Because in Barbie, there was like a lot of that. As soon as they went into the real person world, she was just getting catcalled like crazy, and literally every single man on the street was horrible. I don't think it's as simple as that, and I think that's what Poor Things displays here. Because Rami Youssef's character of Max, he's a very honorable, noble, well-intentioned guy. And there's a specific scene in this film, because what I think is so brilliant and the way they portray Bella's interactions with men, they all just lie and manipulate her, whether out of good or ill will. I mean, it just is something that they feel like they have to kind of impose some sort of boundary onto her, or projection of the world, or whatever they can do to keep her contained. And I think that's a great metaphor of how men try to, control women's bodies and also try to have some sense of authority over them. And that's the thing that's interesting about his character, because there's one scene, and yet again, it does not explicitly say this, but I think the scene, without giving too much away, kind of speaks to a very instinctual feeling that a lot of men have, but maybe won't admit on the surface, that society kind of conditions us to be protective of women, and sometimes almost in a violent sort of way, in the way we kind of fight for one's territory, you could say, right? And yet again, a lot of guys won't admit that, but that's something that this film taps into and doesn't really, beat the audience over the head with that's what they're talking about. But you get it from these character interactions. And of course, yet again, just seeing Bella being completely stripped of a lot of her autonomy throughout this film is really quite heartbreaking. And some of the discoveries that she does make, some of the harsh truths about the real world, are really a tough pill to swallow for her and as the audience, watching this really lovable character who's very much a fish out of water, quite literally. And it's really sad to see these things happen to her, but yet again, it's all part of her process of growing, because this film is essentially about a woman gaining her own autonomy. And I think it's a beautifully done story, and they really explore some interesting avenues within that. It's not just a woman becoming independent, it's more than that. It's what is she doing with her independence to make herself grow and everyone around her. And I also love how sex plays into that, because as I said, I mean, this movie has some of the most sex scenes in any film I've ever seen, and I think it is more than just humor, because look, this is one of the funniest movies of the year and one of the wackiest things you will ever see. And I think that yet again, the comedy hits in the most absurd and grotesque ways, especially with the sex scenes, but also the way that she uses sex is kind of like a teachable moment for her and everyone around her, and how that kind of improves her own life and the people in her circle is really quite something spectacular, and a very, very surprising narrative thread, and something I found to be quite intelligent and insightful, and very much indicative of this character's journey towards womanhood. It's really, really beyond brilliant, the script to this film. If this ends up winning Best Adapted Screenplay, screenplay, please don't be surprised, because I think either this or Oppenheimer would both be incredibly deserving to win that award. It's certainly one that really has you ruminate on a lot of things, and I absolutely love that about this narrative. And also, another thing I find very interesting is how the women in this story are truly the ones who are the most inviting and the most nurturing, and trying to help Bella grow and kind of introduce her to the world in a very thoughtful and helpful way. And I think that part of the film really highlights the film's thesis more than anything. And there's a lot of great supporting players, like I mentioned, who show up. Though one of my few issues with the film is the casting of Gerard Carmichael. And look, I loved his directorial debut and his acting in On the Count of Three last year. And so I was excited to see him in a Yorgos Lanthimos film, but I think he just falls completely flat on the dialogue. And I feel like he sticks out as a sore thumb in this world. And I don't mean that in the sense that his character is supposed to, because that's kind of his deal. But at the same time, I just feel like his acting style comes off as very bland. And he does nothing interesting with his line delivery, really. And I thought that kind of brought the movie down a little bit. Though what they do with his character is quite interesting and a great counterpoint to Bella in this film. But speaking on that note, I mean, if Gerard Carmichael's in this, of course Christopher Abbott is as well. And my goodness, the few scenes he is in, he completely steals the movie from underneath a lot of people. And that's saying a lot, because this cast is really stacked. But he really gives quite a compelling turn in this. And yet again, one of the craziest performances of the year. You're going to get a lot of that in this film, especially considering how much of a bizarre, auteuristic vision that this film presents. And yet again, I mean, there's so much that you can say about this movie, and I really want to see it again, because I feel like, not that I'll raise my score, there are a couple of things here and there. It takes a while to get into the story, but I was enjoying it thoroughly the whole time. And yet again, I feel like there could have been more finality with certain characters and certain elements of the story. But really what is there is something really worth thinking about. I also want to talk about Godwin Baxter again, because this goes to the point about how great the writing in this film is. Because he's a character that could have easily been this two-dimensional sort of caricature of, this mad, genius. But it's much more complicated than that, because he's a character, you understand why he does the things he does, why he lies, why he has this sense of paternal feelings towards Bella, and why he kind of wants to keep her trapped for part of this film. But you understand why this character does the things he does, and his backstory, and why he is driven to do certain things in the narrative. And yet again, he even admits to a lot of the things he does, and he completely owns up to it. And I think that's really interesting, because he doesn't hide away from the negative aspects of his personality, but somehow he just accepts it. And I think, that type of honesty with this type of character is really interesting, because there's a real affection for him in this narrative, and obviously the characters feel it too. And he is really the driving force of what sets this narrative off, because without him, no Bella, right? And yet again, I think Bella Baxter is one of the most genius character creations, but at the same time, I think the way she is portrayed by Emma Stone, the way she's written in the script, is really one of the most compelling characters of the entire year. This film is going to make you feel uncomfortable in the best ways possible. It's going to unnerve you. It's going to make you laugh. It's going to make you think. And it's really, it could make you a better person at the end of the day. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's certainly one that is worth seeing for sure and checking out. This is going to get so many Oscar nominations. I also want to mention the score from Jerskin Fendrix, who honestly composes the best score of the year. Some of the most innovative usage of music I've seen in a long time. Very, very psychedelic. very left field in a lot of ways, not genre-wise, but just how out there it is. It is so creative, and it complements this movie perfectly. And I'd be more than happy to see him win the Oscar for Best Original Score. I don't think there's anything quite like the score. And yeah, there's so much about this movie that truly is visionary and unlike anything I've ever seen. There's just a few things that I think hold it back from being one of the greatest films of all time or something like that. Or one of my absolute favorites of the year, but still, this goes without saying, this is one of my favorite movies of the year, and one that I cannot wait to go back to theaters and see. So I'm going to give Poor Things a 9 out of 10. Please, this is a must-see. I feel like most of you watching this channel anyways will check out Poor Things because, you know, we all love cinema here, I think, and it's an absolute must-see film for fans of the medium and for fans of Yorgos Lanthimos. So yeah, guys, those are my thoughts on Poor Things. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about Poor Things. Really excited to talk about all the movies that are still coming out because we are not done yet, folks, with this year. And one of the movies that I have seen and have yet to talk about is The Iron Claw, which will be my next review, dropping after Christmas. Very excited to talk about that film. Definitely one that's been getting a lot of discussion around it. And of course, you know, some other films are going to be coming out later this week in wide release, I hope. But we'll have to see about that. And of course, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're here for the first time tuning in. Really would appreciate the support. And, you know, if you like content like this, it's going to keep coming your way. I can assure you that much. And yeah, guys, until the next video, please have yourselves a good one and have yourselves a very happy holiday season. We'll talk very, very soon. And yeah, enjoy your time, guys, and we'll talk later.